What's good, traders? Welcome back to another video. So I want to ask you something before we get into this, and I want you to actually think about it. What are you actually doing in the first 5 minutes before you open your charts? Because if you're anything like most traders I speak to, the honest answer is probably nothing, right? You sit down, the platform opens, and you're already scanning, already looking for a trade to place. And somewhere in the background, maybe you've noticed it or maybe you haven't, but your nervous system is already running the session before you've made a single trading decision, right? Maybe the loss from yesterday is still sitting in your chest, or maybe the pressure of the weekly target is quietly lingering in the back of your mind. Could be all sorts of things, and you haven't even placed a trade yet. So here's what I want you to understand, because I think that this changes things if we really take the time to think about it. The session doesn't start when the market opens. It starts the moment you sit down in front of your computer. And what you do in those first 5 minutes determines your psychological environment that every single decision you make today gets filtered through, right? So if you get it right, you trade from clarity. But if you skip it, you're trading from whatever emotional state happened to be running you at that moment in time. Okay? So what I'm going to give you today is a 5 minute routine that you can use before your trading session. It's not a hype ritual or affirmations or anything like that, but a genuine psychological process that gets your nervous system into the right state before the market has a chance to put it into the wrong one. Okay? So before I walk you through it, I want to explain why the morning feels so hard for a lot of traders. Because I think once you understand and become aware of what's actually happening, the routine starts to make a lot more sense, right? The structural mistake that traders make, and I'd bet that you've made it without maybe even knowing it, is going from a normal resting state directly into a high pressure, high stakes environment with no transition time at all, right? No buffer, no check-in, just laptop open, charts up, and adrenaline pumping into a let's go sort of mindset. And the thing is, your nervous system, it doesn't reset overnight, right? The emotional baggage from yesterday's session or whatever may have happened in your personal life, all of it is in your body when you sit down to trade, right? Whether you're consciously aware of it or not. And then what happens when the first loss comes? Well, it sort of acts like a trigger, right? For everything that was already sitting in your emotional state, just waiting for something to trigger it, right? And usually that's the first loss that we take. So that's not really a strategy problem. That's more of a preparation problem. And the solution isn't to just hype yourself up about it, right? Because hype in a way is just suppression with better marketing, right? It pushes the emotional state down rather than addressing it. What actually works is checking in with yourself before the session. So that's a completely different thing, right? Knowing what state you're actually in, understanding what might be driving it, and making a conscious choice about whether you're ready to operate from that state or not, right? So that's what this 5 minute routine does, and it's an extremely valuable practice that's going to help you a lot in your trading and in other areas of your life if you want to use it in those other areas, right? So we're going to keep this simple, and I'm literally going to break it down minute by minute, right? So it's 5 minutes, 5 steps, right? Minute one is called a state check. So before you open a chart, before you do anything at all, you ask yourself one question. What is my emotional state right now? So not what you want it to be, what it actually is. So are you feeling anxious, feeling a bit low energy, carrying some sort of weight from a conversation that hasn't quite resolved yet? Whatever it is, just name it and write it down. Because here's what that does neurologically, right? And I've spoken about this in previous videos, but I'll tell you again. The moment you label an emotional state, like really label it rather than like vaguely acknowledge it, your brain begins shifting processing from the amygdala, which is the reactive part, to the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that actually thinks, right? You create a gap between feeling and decision. And that gap, though it may sound like a small gap, is where your edge actually lives, right? Because it's the equilibrium, right? The emotional equilibrium. And most traders, they skip this, then spend 2 hours wondering why they made an emotional decision mid-session, right? The emotion was there from minute one. They just never fucking looked at it, right? So this is what we want to get into with this whole practice. Now, minute two is called the motive check. So once you know your state, you ask the harder question. And I want you to be really honest with yourself here, because this one is one of the easiest ways to rationalize your way past, right? And the question is this: am I trading today to execute my system, or am I trading to feel something? Because there's a version of wanting to trade that comes from genuine readiness. Your system's been working, you're clear, the process feels solid and you're looking forward to following it. And then there's the version that comes from needing something from the session, right? Needing the validation of a win or needing to recover yesterday's loss. needing the feeling of productivity that only seems to come when you make a profit, right? And the thing about boredom and validation and revenge is that they don't announce themselves as emotional states, right? They disguise themselves as reasons to trade. They feel like conviction and opportunity, so the motive check is how you catch them before they're the thing that ends up driving your decision rather than your actual edge. So if the honest answer is that you're trading to feel something today, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to close the laptop or not trade, but it does mean you have to trade smaller. You have to hold yourself to a much higher standard of quality setups. Now, minute 3 is the permission question. This is an important one, so pay attention. This is the one I find most traders resist the most, okay? So it's probably a good sign to pay attention to. Ask yourself, if I take no trades today, am I genuinely okay with that? Because there's 2 very different places that answer can come from, and only one means you're actually ready to trade. Okay, so if the honest answer is yes, you've separated your identity from today's outcome, you're not here to prove something, not chasing a result, not going to force a setup or anything like that, then you're ready. But if the answer is no, and be honest, because that no is telling you something important, right? It's telling you that at some point in this session, the need to produce a result is going to override your criteria. All right, so this is an important one. And maybe it overrides it on the 3rd, or maybe nothing happens in the morning and you feel like you have to do something in the afternoon, right? That override is where the damage is going to happen. And it starts here in this question before any candles have even printed, right? The permission question, it doesn't mean you don't trade. It just means you trade from choice rather than compulsion. And trust me, the difference will show up in every decision you make for the rest of the session, right? So this is an important one, and you need to be as honest as you can with yourself, as honest as possible, right? Now, minute 4, the levels. So let's move on to where you actually open the charts. Now you get to the trading part. So first, I want to make it clear that I'm not here to influence your strategy decisions or teach you any sort of price action trading or anything like that. I focus purely on the psychology side. However, I have noticed with traders I've worked with that sometimes they go into the session blindly, right? So it's always good to map out your territory before you place a trade. So what I mean by this is, where are the key levels for today's session? Yesterday's high and low, any major structure that's relevant, mark them, because seeing things visually can make all the difference in the world, right? This is important. Because when you know where significant levels are before anything happens, you stop making decisions in no man's land, right? You stop entering in the middle of a range that looked interesting. You have a framework, and the framework anchors you to a structure rather than to whatever emotional state decides to look like an opportunity in the heat of the moment. Okay, so spend 60 seconds, mark your levels, and that's it. That's step 4. That's minute 4. Now, minute 5, this is my favorite one. This is the identity statement. So this last minute really ties it all together. And I want you to be clear about what this is, because it's not a pep talk and it's not an affirmation or anything like that, right? You can write or say it out loud, one sentence about who you are as a trader today. Not who you want to be, but who you are today. And it has to be something specific. So you could say something like, I am a trader who only takes A-grade setups and walks away from everything else. Or I am a trader who protects capital first and trusts the edge to produce the results. Whatever it is for you, say it before you start, right? And this works because your brain is running a constant background check on every decision you make, right? Asking one question underneath all the noise, is this consistent with who I am, right? When you set the identity before the session starts, you're giving that question a clear answer to compare everything else against, okay? I hope that makes sense. Because every impulse that arises, the urge to move your stop loss, to take the trade that wasn't in the plan, or to size up because you need to make back what you lost, it gets checked against the identity statement you set before any of it began. It doesn't completely eliminate the impulse, but it does create friction between the impulse and the action. And the friction, repeated over time, is really how you begin to shift your identity. This is a really powerful exercise, right? So that's it. That's the 5 minutes. State check, motive check, permission check, mark the levels, and identity statement, right? And just before we finish, I want to say something about what this actually is, because I think it's worth naming as well. This whole practice isn't an exercise to convince yourself you're going to have a great day. It's not about visualizing wins or getting fired up or any shit like that. It's about walking into the session knowing what state you're in, right? Understanding what's driving you and choosing to operate as a trader you're building rather than the one your emotional state is trying to make you, okay? Because The traders who are consistent, the ones who are still here years later, form the habit of checking in every single morning, right? Before the market gets a chance to check in on them first. So 5 minutes, try it first thing tomorrow morning and pay attention to what's actually there when you look, right? So as always, if you got value from the video, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment and let me know how your 5-minute routine goes. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.